Imagine a tiny island nation rising to dominate a quarter of the globe, ruling over 450 million people and shaping the modern world as we know it. How did Britain, a small cluster of islands, build the largest empire in history? From daring explorers to brutal conquests, from the Industrial Revolution to the dark legacy of colonialism. If you were to look at Britain on a map today, you might assume its borders are confined to the British Isles. However, scattered across the globe, there are 14 overseas territories where the British government still holds sway. From Gibraltar at the Mediterranean's entrance, to the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic. These territories are the remnants of what was once the mighty British Empire. At its peak just over a century ago, the empire spanned a quarter of the Earth's landmass and governed nearly a third of the world's population. It was famously said to be the empire on which the sun never set. But how did such a small island nation rise to become the largest and most powerful empire in history? This is the story of the British Empire. The foundations of the British Empire were laid long before Britain existed as a unified state. For much of its history, the dominant power in the British Isles was the Kingdom of England, which boasted a strong economy and a formidable military. During the medieval and early modern periods, England extended its control over Wales and parts of Ireland, though Scotland to the north remained fiercely independent, successfully resisting repeated invasions from its southern neighbour. By the early 17th century, England, under Queen Elizabeth I, began commissioning explorers and traders to venture into uncharted territories. Figures like Sir Francis Drake and Sir Martin Frobisher claimed lands in the name of England, though these claims were not immediately followed by settlements. The first English colony in North America, established at Roanoke Island in 1585, ended in failure when the colonists mysteriously vanished. Elizabeth also granted royal charters to joint stock companies, such as the Levant Company, 1592, and the East India Company, 1600, which were given monopolies over trade in specific regions. When Elizabeth died in 1603, the English throne passed to James VI of Scotland, uniting the crowns of England and Scotland under one monarch. However, the two kingdoms remained separate entities. James sought to expand England's colonial efforts, establishing three types of colonies: crown colonies, directly ruled by the monarch; charter colonies, governed under corporate charters; and proprietary colonies, managed by individuals or companies. Over time, many proprietary colonies transitioned to crown control due to difficulties in management. A significant but often overlooked aspect of England's colonial expansion was the plantation of Ulster, where Protestant settlers from England and Scotland were sent to Northern Ireland. This model of organised colonisation would later influence English efforts in the New World. Throughout the 17th century, England expanded its colonies in North America and the Caribbean, sometimes seizing territories from rival powers like the Dutch, who lost New York to England in 1665. England also developed extensive trading networks in Africa and the East Indies, establishing factories and fortified trading posts. The Royal African Company, founded in 1660, played a central role in the transatlantic slave trade, which became a brutal yet highly profitable enterprise. Meanwhile, Scotland attempted to establish its own colonies, but most efforts, such as the ill-fated Darien Scheme in Panama, ended in failure, plunging Scotland into financial crisis. By the early 18th century, England and Scotland formally united under the Acts of Union in 1707, creating the Kingdom of Great Britain. Over the next century, Britain became embroiled in numerous wars with European powers, often fighting to protect or expand its colonial interests. The Treaty of Utrecht, 1713, and the Treaty of Paris, 1763, granted Britain significant territorial gains, including Newfoundland, Acadia, Gibraltar, and several Caribbean islands. The British East India Company also expanded its influence in India, particularly after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, which cemented British control over Bengal. The loss of the American colonies following the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, marked a turning point for the British Empire. Britain shifted its focus to Asia, the Pacific, and Africa. Explorers like Captain James Cook charted new territories, including Australia and New Zealand, which became penal colonies for British convicts. Britain also expanded its presence in the North Pacific, with explorers like George Vancouver mapping the western coast of North America. The Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815, further solidified Britain's dominance as a global power. The Royal Navy's victory at Trafalgar in 1805 secured British naval supremacy for over a century. By the war's end, Britain had acquired additional territories, including Malta, Mauritius, and the Cape Colony in South Africa. The Industrial Revolution transformed Britain's economy, shifting focus from slave-produced goods to domestic manufacturing. Growing abolitionist pressure led to the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade in 1807 and the emancipation of slaves in 1834. The 19th century is often referred to as Britain's imperial century. The British East India Company expanded its control over India, which became the jewel in the crown of the empire. Britain also established colonies in Singapore, Hong Kong, and parts of Africa. The scramble for Africa in the late 19th century saw Britain gain control of vast territories, including Egypt after the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. By the early 20th century, Britain's empire was at its zenith, but challenges loomed. The rise of Germany and the outbreak of World War I in 1914 tested the empire's resilience. Britain relied heavily on its colonies for resources and military support during the war, but the conflict also sowed the seeds of decolonization. Over the following decades, the British Empire would gradually dissolve, leaving behind a complex legacy that continues to shape the world today.
Want to dive deeper into the rise and fall of the British Empire? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to join us on this journey through history. Let us know in the comments, what do you think was the most defining moment of the British Empire?